Welcome back to another episode of In the Foxhole. I'm your host, JC Chanowski.
And I'm Angela Schroeder.
Angela, we have an incredible guest today, a guest that we got to hear speak at Home Service Expo recently. No, workshop. I always say Expo. Home Service Workshop. I've known Caleb for many years from Conquer. I've seen him just have tremendous growth. Got to hang out with him at a small mastermind in Gatlinburg 2 years ago now, was it, Caleb?
Yeah, I think so.
With Conquer, high altitude. Caleb, welcome to In the Foxhole.
Really good to be here. I've been kind of like excited for this ever since I got invited because I love hanging out with both of you guys. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
We are excited too to learn more about you. Angela, got to hang out with you in Phoenix.
And I just told Caleb again when we saw him this time. I was so excited when I texted JC and I was like,
Well, hopefully it wasn't a disappointment or too awkward. I felt like I had been wanting to meet you too, because I knew JC obviously going back several years, and I knew we'd eventually cross paths just because we kind of travel in some similar circles. So I was really happy to meet you as well. We had a great time and just been a great friendship ever since. So yeah, this is really cool. Right.
All right, Caleb. So I've got to know you over the past few years being a part of Conquer and most recently at the Home Service Workshop. But for our viewers, why don't you tell them a little bit about your company and what you're working on right now?
Yeah. So I have been in home services since I was about 16 years old. I started cleaning windows for my buddy's dad in Northern Michigan, and then eventually started my own window cleaning company. I think we're starting our 24th year in business this year, which is pretty crazy to say that out loud. And early on, probably the first half of that time period, I was just kind of owner operator. Spent a lot of time on the truck, went through all those struggles, and eventually realized I had to kind of change some things up if I was ever going to get the business to where I wanted it. So started diving into business development and entrepreneurship, and spending time with people who were kind of where I wanted to be. And I was eventually able to grow that company to now where it's run by a management team. So I only spend an hour or two a week, working on that company. Been able to partner on a few other home service businesses that are kind of in development right now. Started working with the Conquer program about 4 years ago. Been coaching for the past 3 years or so. And that's been really rewarding. So my week is usually filled with, coaching calls, content development for Conquer, working in my home service businesses, just kind of developing those. And so a lot of variety and a lot of flexibility, which is kind of what I'm really going for. I love the time freedom, and I love the opportunity to kind of work on different projects, from day to day. The monotony of doing the same thing every day really gets to me. So I love having all these different irons in the fire that just kind of really keep me stimulated and creative. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
It's awesome.
How great to be at a point in your business of that you have built a business and a life of having an impact, one, and then, like you said, the freedom to just get to do the things that you love and not touch the things you don't.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Sometimes I have to like scratch myself because it's like, how did I, when I first started my business, I didn't have a plan. I wasn't like one of these entrepreneurs that, as a kid, I was like selling lemonade, or I never did any of that. I just sort of fell into it on accident. And even when I started, I didn't really have a plan. I never really thought, oh, this is my roadmap and this is where it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. I was just almost living day by day early on. And so I kind of look at myself as a late bloomer from an entrepreneurship standpoint. I didn't really realize that that's what I had turned into until I was years down the road. And so that's kind of given me a little bit of an interesting perspective, because most of the people that I end up spending a lot of time with these days, they kind of understand they have that entrepreneurial itch early, and they're just following that. And I feel like my path was a lot different. And so it's just been kind of an interesting thing to realize about myself. But here I am, and I'm doing the entrepreneur thing now. So
I mean, I love these, your business 24 years. That's absolutely incredible. Some of our viewers aren't even 24 years old.
Yeah,
people have been in a relationship that are 24 years.
Right.
You've been in business since Rolodexes were a thing. And so you've kind of got through it all with phone books and the internet and all that stuff.
Totally.
At what point did you start shifting your mindset though to hire that management team and change your direction of working in the business and versus on the business, or in the business?
Good question. And there was a really like distinct moment for me. I was really like, I had hired a few people, so I had a small team, but I wasn't really a leader or a manager or a business person at all. It was just like, get the jobs, go do the thing, get the money, wash, rinse, repeat, hopefully forever. That was all I was thinking. And then I got approached by a local competitor and they wanted to see if I was interested in buying them out. And I knew I wanted to grow, but I didn't know how to market really. I thought marketing and advertising was for people who weren't good at the work, and so they had to like go buy customers. That's how dumb I was. um, I really thought that. And so this guy was like, "Yeah, I want to sell my business." And I didn't know the first thing about buying a business, but it seemed like, oh, this is a way that I could probably grow like 30 or 40% just like overnight. So how would I structure a deal? So I started going online, and somehow made it to the window cleaning forums. There was a really popular one at the time. And again, I usually avoided that community because I was like, there's nothing happening there that I don't already know. And so it's a waste of my time. But I thought, all right, well, I'll take a stab at this and I'll throw a post up. And I got some pretty dumb answers, pretty bad answers, but I got a handful of like really intelligent answers. And I realized, oh, there are people here that know way more about business than I do. And they're using language that I'm not familiar with, and they're using terms that I don't know about, and they're thinking about things in a way that I've never even considered. And I think that was all it took. It just opened that door a tiny little bit, and I started asking more questions, and pretty quickly realized how little I knew, how dumb I had been up to that point. And then once I knew that, then it was on. It was like I just became a sponge for anything business growth related. I started to learn what marketing and sales really were, and that, I had been missing the mark badly for years on that. I started to learn what a company culture was, because I thought that was all nonsense too. I didn't believe in that. I thought that was just like corporate mumbo jumbo. That like those were lies you told people to get them to do what you wanted them to do. That's what I thought company culture was. So I started to learn about that, and leadership development, building a team, understanding your weaknesses, and trying to kind of like backfill your company so that you had a broad skill set across the whole team. Just all that stuff, the financials. So that's when things really changed for me, and I really started to become a student of business, I would say. And maybe like more of a true entrepreneur than I had previously. And it just took that just random, moment of like, I'm going to humble myself enough to ask for a little advice on whether I should buy this business or not. And then that opened the floodgates for me. I never ended up buying that business. I realized it was a terrible deal and I didn't need it. And I wasn't ready for it. So even that paid off, that I avoided probably making a big mistake. But I think that moment, just my education began then, and it's really never stopped.
Man, Caleb, I could listen to your story. I mean, we've just gotten a glimpse into this story of the beginning of your entrepreneurship, and then, a first mind shift change, which obviously led to tons of growth and more later. But just right now, like your comparison of how naive you were in the beginning as business owners, which a lot of people are, and your thoughts. Like I said, I could listen to these stories.
Yeah. And it was self-inflicted naivety. It wasn't even like I was trying to learn, or I didn't know who to talk to. I wasn't even looking, because I really thought I knew everything I needed to know. And I think, it was almost forced on me to like acknowledge that I was totally clueless, which I needed that, I think, as an entrepreneur at that time. I needed to be humbled, and I needed to recognize, you know, the holes in my game, really. And so I'm just thankful that happened, accidental or not, because I wouldn't be here if it hadn't.
Well, on the flip side to that, one, you're not alone because most of us have gone through that. But I was looking, I was in the forums, I was reading the posts, I was asking the questions, but I wasn't listening. I was the naive, like, I can do this myself. They don't know what they're talking about. I've got 5 years of military experience. I can do this. Like, I'm good to go. And then once it clicked in 2019, I was like, whoa, what was I doing the last 7 years? Like, why was I wasting all this time? Like, holy cow.
Right. Well, and I think the culture back then was different too. We weren't as receptive there weren't as many new ideas out there just bombarding us all the time. And I think that, a lot of these younger people that are coming up in home services have a really nice advantage, because they're better positioned to just take in information and learn from people, and they don't feel like they need to reinvent the wheel so much. So I think that's a great thing. And to be, I can't unwind the clock and have that mindset back then, but I feel like at least I can sort of facilitate other people making those strides much faster and avoiding a lot of those mistakes, and, the broken mindset that I had, and just the ignorance that I had. So at least I have that, right? Like I can help other people avoid all the dumb stuff that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Caleb, before we dive into some of the obstacles and trenches, foxhole moments for you, what's a win you're celebrating right now, either in your business or in some area of your life?
Ah, man, you asked that a few minutes ago, like before we started, and I was like, what would I even say? I don't know that I can put it into like a single thing that's happening or a single event. Um, I think that I've reached a point, um, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, at least, where opportunities and relationships and connections are just abundant, and
Mm,
it's not so much anymore like, uh, what am I going to do? What's my next move? It's which exciting thing am I going to choose to pursue?
mm,
And I talked earlier about loving to have options and to be able to do completely new, exciting things all the time. And I just feel like I've kind of gotten to a point, on my entrepreneurial path where that's just normal now, and I'm having to develop new skills like the ability to say no a lot,
mm.
which is really hard. Um,
Yeah.
but it's really exciting too. It's really exciting. So I think that's my win. Is just like I feel like I graduated a little bit from one
Mm.
phase of this whole thing to something new, and it's just like a whole lot of new exciting stuff coming at me all at once, and it's pretty fun.
Mm.
It's good stuff. And I got to hear you speak at Nashville 2 years ago when we were at the Highest Summit. And I remember pulling you aside and asking like how you got so good at speaking. And we talked for a little while. And I got to hear you speak at in Arizona a couple weeks ago too. So I mean, that's my win for knowing you, is being able to see you speak and see you again most recently on stage. Because I really do enjoy watching you. You're really good at it. So my
Awesome.
win was
Thank
seeing you recently. So
you. I
excited for
appreciate
that.
that.
All right, Caleb. So I'm gonna hope you can help me out with this one as we start talking about these foxhole trenches. When business was tough, we're gonna talk about the anti-highlight reel, and our viewers, they range in from entrepreneurs just starting out, and then entrepreneurs that are trying to grow their business and maybe hire the management level. So if you can like find two, maybe in the earlier stages of business where like
Mhm.
things were just rough, like oh man, crazy, like why am I doing this? And then as you were trying to scale and grow your company and put that leadership and team in place, like maybe it was a bad hire, poor systems in place, maybe highlight it on two of those moments if you would.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of pretty clear things come to mind when you ask that question. I think the first step I had to take was, learning how to let go of control,
Mhm.
Mm.
which I know a lot of entrepreneurs that they really struggle with that. A lot of people I coach, that's one of the first kind of mental blocks we need to get through. But that was a really big deal for me because I had like an artisan mindset when it came to my work. I thought I was the best in the world at what I did, and I took a lot of pride in all of the just the way that I went about things. And I felt like that was the most important thing I was bringing to the table was the work I was doing with my hands. And as you grow, you have two sets of hands or one set of hands, two hands total. And if you want to grow, you've got to add more hands onto the team. And I was terrified of that. I had a really hard time making my first hire and then allowing them to have a little bit of independence and then eventually allowing them to work without me kind of hovering over them and then allowing them to manage even another person. Just all of that was excruciating for me. And I would sometimes like lay awake at night thinking, like worrying, that oh, those guys were on that job all day without me. I hope the customer isn't at home just stewing about what a bad job they did. I would like worry about that. Um, and I think for me, I just had to live with it for a while, and you start to realize that okay, it's not that big of a deal. No one cares nearly as much as I do, and I got to get over it. But that was like a painful, kind of slow process for me. And again, I was kind of doing that alone. I didn't really have anybody to guide me through that, so it was almost being forced through circumstances to have to just accept that.
Mhm.
Um, so that was a big challenge. Um, but I eventually got to the point where I was really comfortable with that. Now I've probably swung too far the other way. Like I don't even want to know what you're doing. I don't want to control you at all. Don't talk to me unless it's a crisis. So yeah, I went a little too far on the other end of the spectrum there. So I think that was the first big obstacle. But once I got past that, that unlocked a lot because now I can confidently go bring people onto my team and let them do their thing and just kind of get out of their way. And I got comfortable with that. Um, so that put me in a position where now I could start to look at people not as people I needed to manage per se, but people that could actually help me develop and grow the business develop and grow other people, that I didn't have to do all of that myself. And even I got comfortable with the idea of people helping me grow and develop people on my team. So that got me to the point where I was starting to realize that I needed leaders, I needed influencers on my team. And I always reflect back on this. Probably the thing that I did right more than anything else that helped me grow my business to where it's at was I was able to attract and inspire influencers, people who could influence other people. And I think that helped me a lot. But that did lead me to, making a probably in retrospect, a really bad decision in terms of hiring. And that was probably the darkest time I went through in my time in business. I've never felt more stress or more anxiety or just more misery than I did during that period. And I remember it was my first big hire where I put out a job ad and I, had a job description actually written out, and this person was going to be on salary, and I was starting to try to implement the things that I was learning. There were performance bonuses, and this person was going to be a titled manager in my company. It was the first hire that I'd made from outside the company rather than just kind of developing from within. So that was scary. I didn't know them very well. I knew of them and I knew their work history, but it wasn't like I groomed them into that role. So it was a little bit scary, but it was also exciting because it felt like this is a kind of a milestone moment, and this is going to be the new normal in my companies. I'm going to go find talent and I'm going to bring them onto my team, and they're just going to crush it, and we're all going to get rich, and it's going to be easy. And that's just not what happened at all. It was probably about 1.5 years before I finally accepted that this was just a bad fit. Great person, loved the person, enjoyed working with the person for the most part. Just the skill set didn't match up with what I needed. And the culture fit just wasn't quite right. And I had other people in my company telling me this, and deep down I knew it, but I liked the person a lot. And I'm a big softie. If you look at my hire bus, I don't know if your audience is familiar with hire bus, but my criticality is all the way at the bottom. So I think everybody rules. I think everybody's the best ever. And I have a really hard time, seeing people's flaws or accepting those. And that was what was happening here. He just wasn't performing and it wasn't working. And I just let it go on way, way too long. And it was affecting everything, morale, profitability, my mental health. And so that was my foxhole, was kind of living through that and coming to the realization that I needed to make this really difficult decision to let this person go. And maybe to some people listening, that sounds like an easy thing to do, but for me, it was paralyzing. It was terrible.
Were you just hoping it'd fix itself out over time?
You know what I did, JC, was I blamed myself. I took the responsibility off of that person.
Caleb, we lost you.
All right.
Hold on one second, Caleb.
You back?
So start with you.
Yeah, just
Okay.
when you
Start your answer.
Okay. What I did was I took responsibility off of that person and I put it on myself. I blamed myself for his failure to perform. And I didn't know I was doing it at the time. I thought I was being a good leader. I thought I was taking responsibility. So I would say I haven't given them clear enough direction. I haven't put them in a position to succeed. I haven't given them the right systems. I haven't given them the right resources. And I just took all the blame on myself. And I kept trying to fix what I was doing so that they could succeed. And it just, sometimes there's truth to that, but sometimes it's just the person isn't getting it done. They're not the right or whatever the case may be. And, I just didn't want to accept that. Okay, we good?
Yeah, we're back. So I don't know if you heard any of what I said. So I'll say that again. If my first time was better than the second, editor used the first time. But what I was saying is, I think that is something, what you experienced is a common thread among a lot of visionary entrepreneurs, a lot that we've talked to. I know Dan Plata shared that with us, and it's definitely something that a trait that I have. I wouldn't describe myself as a softie. or my team probably wouldn't. But I always think I can save people. And like you said,
Mhm.
take accountability that like, oh, if I would have just been a better leader, I can just be a better leader and you'll be better in your position. And it does affect team morale, it affects profitability, it affects the whole company because they see you're tolerating this behavior and that becomes the new expectation. But the biggest effect, like you said, is on your mental health.
Yeah.
And it was a huge lesson for me, even in this last year, as I got a really strong integrator that said, you have to cut the emotion out of it, Angela. Look at the numbers, look at the performance. Like, I will cut them out for you.
Mhm.
Like, say, I got to save you from yourself. But when it's weighing at you so on your mental health, it completely affects how you are leading everyone else in your company and the relationships in your life.
100%. And it turns into just a massive bottleneck. It really
Mhm.
does. And it's so funny that you said that, Angela, because that's the ultimate solution for me had a lot to do with, my integrator who, now my partner, still my integrator to this day. And this is 7 or 8 years later. He had to step up and kind of save me from myself. And I'm so thankful that he did. And so I learned two big things from that whole experience. Number one, you got to be able to identify your own weaknesses and take yourself out of those situations. Like if it's not something you can just get better at through practice and effort, if it's how you're wired, you got to take yourself out of those situations and delegate those to somebody who's better at it. And I'm grateful that I had someone on my team that was able to kind of take on that role. So after that whole experience, I stopped doing any firing or performance reviews. I really stepped back on interviewing and hiring because I'm not as good at like reading people and judging their performance as other people are.
Yep.
And I need to know that about myself. And I need to step back and empower someone else to do that on my team because we're going to get a better result as a team. And
Mhm.
that's what happened. So that was a big thing that I learned was identify your weaknesses, be willing to step back, delegate, get somebody on your team if you don't currently have them so that you can delegate those things and then stay out of their way. Trust them. And the other thing I learned was if your expectations are fuzzy
Mm.
or always shifting
Mhm.
and they aren't clearly defined, then it's really hard to hold people accountable and feel good about it and feel confident about it. So, one of my kind of like core principles now is put a number on it. And when I learned to do that, when I learned to start, and you can't reduce people just to numbers, we know that. That's not what I'm saying. But they're like when people talk about KPIs, that's performance, key performance indicators.
Mhm.
Everybody in your company needs to have some numbers associated with what they do. And those are facts about how they're performing. And for me, that takes a lot of the emotion out of it. Now it's not, if I have to sit down and have a difficult conversation with somebody, it's not how I feel about them or how what my mood is at that moment or whatever. It's what do the numbers tell us? And now it's them against the numbers, not them against me. And so to whatever degree you can kind of bring that into the picture, it just eases at least for me, it eased that whole dynamic of um, all the feels getting in the way. And I'm not a super emotional person, but like when it came to my team and making hard decisions like that,
Yeah.
that's where it got me. And so bringing those numbers into the picture takes a lot of the emotional pressure off of making decisions like this. So those are probably the two big takeaways from that situation.
And I think even for myself, that first hire is always the hardest for business owners because we want to have that expectations of everything being perfect.
Mhm.
They're not going to do it as good as me. They're not going to take care of the customer as good as me. And once you let that go, and I'm not saying we go to the extreme right like you did, I was like, I don't even care anymore. Like
Right.
we got to baby that and still nurture that and set the standards and set the expectations, but understanding that it's not going to be 100% every time. But as long as the customer is being, the job satisfaction is complete, 5 stars, and all that stuff, then that's fine. We'll work with it and we'll improve it from there and not, inspect what you expect as well too.
Mhm.
And I see it with a lot of companies that are telling me like there's nobody that wants to work because they're
Mm.
hiring people and firing people.
Mhm.
And I asked the question, well, is it they don't want to work or they don't want to work with you because you're too controlling, because you won't let go, because you have high expectations, because you don't have clear defined KPIs and all that stuff for them to be successful. And you're always, looking over their shoulder like, well, I would have done this way better, or you could have been doing it this way. That you're not going to let them grow or empower them to want to be better for you or the company if you're constantly just on top of them and correcting them and telling them they're doing everything wrong instead of praising them and learning with them, because they might be doing something a little bit better, something different than I could have done it. And I'm like, oh wow, like, thanks. That's cool. Now we need to implement it in the company.
Yeah, that is so true, JC. I think one of the big epiphanies I had was not even just getting comfortable with people doing things differently than I would, but reaching a point where I appreciate that, where I like it's an asset. It's not something I tolerate. It's not something I live with. It's something that I appreciate and I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Because the more talent and the more insight and the more vision we can bring into our teams, just the more complete we are.
Mhm.
And so I would encourage anybody who's like struggling with that, just do the work on yourself to get to that point, because that is so empowering when you can start to look at others and not only say, hey, these are the standards, but however you get there is kind of okay. When you can go even beyond that and say, actually, I'm really curious about your thinking process, or where do you see opportunities for improvement, or how would you do this differently and why? And when you can just like open yourself up to that, oh man, it's just like, that's a whole new world. It really is.
And it requires self-growth. Like you said, you have to be
Mhm.
able to work on yourself first to do that, because we come into the scenario, like we've all talked about at the beginning, like, I know it all. I got
Mhm.
it all. I know it all. My way is the best. Like you as an artisan, like this way or the
Mhm.
highway.
Mhm.
And somebody else, uh, I think in the beginning, before we've done the work, someone threatening that or suggesting a different way, like eats at our insecurities of that we weren't the best. And if our way wasn't the way, then there's something wrong with us and we didn't create the way. So it does start with your own personal, work and growing enough that you're open to other ideas. And that's really what's going to take you to the next level, is when you can surround yourself with a team that you're willing to bring everyone's strengths together and realize you don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And just speaking for myself, I never would have gotten there on my own. I never would have had those realizations and kind of changed my perspective if I hadn't had people around me to kind of encourage me and like support me and push me, make me uncomfortable, but even like go on that kind of journey with me.
Hmm.
Um, so going back to that story of having to like make that difficult staff decision and let this person go, I remember sitting at a table at a mastermind with people that I'm still close friends with to this day, people really well, telling this story about how difficult it is working with this person and what a mess it is and I don't know what to do. And it was the like reinforcement that I got from the people at that table and the encouragement and the hard questions, like the penetrating questions that I had to answer. They put me on trial. They really did, and I needed it. Like I wouldn't have done that myself. And I left that event, I left that table committed to making this hard
Mm.
decision. And I still knew it was going to be hard. I still dreaded it. It was still terrible, but I did it. And it was what needed to be done. And you know what happened? Within a couple of hours after that, I felt so much relief
Mm.
and I felt like liberated. And I felt like I really turned a page because it was like, um, I can do this. Like I can do this again if I need to. And it won't be this hard and it won't go this long. And I'll know what to look for the next time. And that
What kind of
experience. Go ahead.
what kind of dialogue that opened with your team? Because you said they were expressing their concerns with you, and you just kept turning a blind eye. But now that you finally made that, I mean, was it like, "Oh, we told you so," or was it, "Thank you, and this is what we can do going forward"?
Um, no, I mean, I'm really blessed that the people that I was working with at the time and some of them that I still work with were very gracious about it. It was it was hard for them too.
Mhm.
And but we all were able to have a really honest conversation after that about like what my role in the company needed to be.
Mhm.
Mm.
And I don't want to paint it like after that everything was solved, because it wasn't. Like it was still lots of hard things happened over the next couple of years, and lots of difficult conversations with like my integrator and other people. It really took me a couple of years to kind of fully evolve from being too involved in everything and making too many decisions and too much of my personality being stamped on the business, to a degree that it was holding us back. But that was like the first domino to fall, I feel like. But it got us comfortable having those like really frank conversations. And we still have those to this day. And so again, it was something that needed to happen, and I'm glad it did, because we wouldn't be where we are now if that hadn't occurred.
Yeah. And you recognize it, like you said, is such a pivotal moment
Mhm.
in your personal development, and a recognize, you said like two things really happened, and you're able to recognize that at a point that you needed to take a step back and realize your weaknesses, and then not put yourself in those situations. And such a great point of that for younger business owners. That's a lesson that's hard for us to learn. That not only learning, hey, this isn't my strength, but I need to protect myself, or have somebody, surround yourself with an integrator, that somebody that protects you from yourself,
Mhm.
from your own weaknesses, and putting strategies into place, like the KPIs, like the things that take your own, take you out of the game. That I think so many times we justify that there aren't KPIs for some certain positions, right? That
Mm.
it's easy to have a KPI for a technician,
Mhm.
and how much work you get done, but then there's softer positions or admin positions in the company that are hard to do. But unless you put those in place, you take yourself back to your own subjective weaknesses.
Yeah, it all you have to lean on is a judgment call
Hmm.
if you don't have anything like that in place. And that's just a, maybe for some people that's an easy seat to sit in, but not for me. Um, so I needed that extra bit of like data, if you will, or evidence, to where I
Yeah.
could shift some of it. What it feels like to me is shifting some of the blame off of me
Yeah.
and onto something, sort of concrete and impersonal, you know?
Hmm.
So I can say, no, see, it's the numbers. It's not me. I didn't do this. I didn't do it. The numbers did it. And maybe that's a little psychological device that I created for myself, but it works.
All right, Caleb, I'm going to shift the dialogue up, or the conversation up a little bit, but stay on the hiring. All right.
Mhm.
This is 2024. Caleb just started his company, owner operator, trying to grow your pressure washing company, or any company.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most critical first hire for a company? Is it going to be
Mm.
sales, admin, or technician?
I think that really depends on the person. I know that's a terrible answer, but I'm gonna tell you why. Um, I think you need to know yourself and you need to know what your strengths are. Um, for some of us, we're going to be most productive just out there doing the work, and for a while, we're going to be more profitable than anybody else doing that. We're going to be the best. That puts us in the best position to connect with the customer on a sales level. So just being out there, sometimes that's the best place to be.
Mhm.
And so if we're going to be out there doing the work and also trying to do the sales, then we need back office support like no other. We need to think about what are these, lower level. I don't want to diminish the importance, but maybe lower cost per hour or lower productivity in terms of revenue dollars per hour functions that need to happen in the business that I can outsource. So for most people, I like the admin or a virtual assistant as the first hire, because it's so easy to delegate things to that position. It's the easiest position to get somebody up to speed quickly,
Mhm.
and to free you up to focus on the big revenue generating activities. I also think that the talent pool in that space is much broader than it is in, the hands-on out there in the field or sales talent pool. So it's easier to find a really great person to put in that seat. And so when I'm small, what I'm thinking is how quickly can I can I make a significant jump in the performance of the company? And so I think admin usually is the right call. Now, having said that, if you're terrible at the work, if you absolutely hate the work, if maybe you have some physical limitations, then I think that's when you try to replace yourself in the field as soon as you can, and then you focus on sales really, really hard,
Mhm.
just driving revenue, sales and marketing. So I know that's not a clear cut, concrete answer, but I think you've got to be able to assess what your talents and strengths are in the moment, and focus on the most valuable ones, and then backfill the other positions as much as you can, as fast as you can.
No, and I love that. And I think if you're terrible at the work and you hate the work, you're probably in the long wrong line of work.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, if I started a window washing company, I'm not washing the windows.
You'd probably be great at it, Angela. I bet you would.
Jeff likes taught me. I can do it a little.
I
she did
bet
do
you'd be
she did do
fantastic at
speed
cleaning
cleaning.
windows.
Yeah.
But I've had two conversations today and multiple in the last couple of weeks with owner operators on trying to grow their company. And admin is always my first. I
Yeah.
truly think it is the most important for growing your company. And I do this quick, like just real quick, and just I break it down for simple numbers. The phone. If you're
Mhm.
talking to a customer, you're not answering the phone, you're missing a phone call. If you're doing a job and you're cleaning, you can't answer the phone, you're missing a phone call. And let's just say you have a 50% closing percentage. And I'm just gonna do simple math. And your average ticket is $500. So for every phone calls, you're closing $1,000. Simple math, right? So if you miss 4 phone calls because you're talking to a customer, you're on a roof, you're whatever, you possibly just lost out on $1,000 worth of work, because if you call the customer back, maybe they already found somebody else, maybe you got their voicemail and they're not gonna be able to connect with you. So just by having somebody able to answer that phone for you so you can do other things like selling, like doing the work, completing the work, like that alone, that return of investment is absolutely incredible. And then they can do all the other things that we don't want to deal with, like coming back from a 10-hour workday, sending off emails, sending off the invoices, closing out, jobs and stuff like that. So I think, like you said, like for the best bang for the buck, that admin is the most crucial to help you grow. Hire somebody to train them to do the work, and then you can work more on sales while they're completing the work.
Yeah.
But it's just a scary hire. Any new position, first position, is always scary for most. But once you do it and you look back 6 months and a year, you're like, well, that was easy. Let's do it
Mhm.
again, and let's do
Yeah.
it again.
I generally agree with you 100%. I would say 9 times out of 10, admin should be the first hire. Like if I go back to when I first started and I was on my own, I hired my brother-in-law as my first helper, um, which was okay. I mean, I'm working with my brother-in-law, so. But if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I would have hired like an office assistant for sure, just to help me manage the schedule, manage the phones, manage the customers, get paid. Um, just all that stuff that I would usually have to do like one-handed while I'm trying to do work, or like at 10 o'clock at night after my kids are in bed or whatever. Um, it would have freed me up a lot. And I think it would have changed the trajectory of my business much, much earlier. And it was probably 3 or 4 years before I hired anybody to help in the office. And I used to look at that as an expense. I was like, well, I can't afford it.
Right.
And you both talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. How many times do you hear that story? I can't
Mhm.
afford it. I can't afford it. They look at team members as expenses.
Mhm.
And as we know, good team members are never expenses, they're assets. They only make you money.
Yeah.
And that would have been the case for me. I just didn't know it.
Yeah, you mentioned, virtual assistants, and I'm not here to plug Unique Genius, but with how easy it is to get a virtual assistant,
Mhm.
onboard them, train them, and get them going. We hired Ronnie, my inbound, outbound call scheduler, everything. I think within 5 days, she was able to answer calls for our company
Yeah,
and be
that,
productive. Like
totally. And
5 days, and she's
yeah,
overseas. You know?
that's one thing that is really amazing about this type of position too, especially over the last few years, is there is so much support to get to, like if you're just blue collar guy, like I know the work. That's what I know. There are so many places that you can go to get support to fill a spot like this, and you don't even have to do the recruiting
Mhm.
or a lot of the interviewing or the training. Like out of any position you're ever going to hire for in your home service company, administrative support is one where you can literally outsource it to someone else and they'll do 90% of it for you. It's plug and play. And you
Yeah.
can't do that with any other position in your business.
Yeah.
So when we go back to what's the fastest, easiest way for me to gain leverage by adding someone on my team, it's admin support, hands down, by a factor of 10. So just strictly from that standpoint, it's a no-brainer to me. Again, it's only if it's like extenuating circumstances would I ever say you go in a different direction as your first hire.
Love it. Well, Caleb, time flew. I want to go another hour.
I
I wish
know.
we could. We'll have to do a part 2. I appreciate you
Yeah,
getting vulnerable and talking to us and sharing your stories.
Yeah. So many
absolutely.
great takeaways and nuggets and, just reflections even on my own journey. So always great to spend time with you, Caleb.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. I've been looking forward to this, like I said, for a while, and I agree. Like I love talking with both of you. So anytime you guys want to get together, I'm down. Just let me know.
We'll make it happen.
All right.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode in the Foxhole. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for another episode next week.